Thank you for pressing start on episode 54 of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcast. Today we have 2 secret games, followed by a review of our featured game, Sifu. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. I'm Bo Po, and joining me is my best friend, playing games that he recommends. He's the biggest fan of Mega Man, flipping phones after smartphones began. I'm talking about the late-night streaming, secret game scheming. Everyone say hola to DiscoCola! What is going on?
Man, Bopo, this week really kicked my ass so bad that my life is flashing before my eyes. Do you get it? How are you?
I'm doing just fine. My crazy-eyed botanist. Those are references to our featured game, Sifu. And we are reviewing Sifu alongside a dear friend of ours, OniMochi. We've known OniMochi for a long time, and it's going to be a great discussion.
I actually found out long after I met OniMochi that we went to the same elementary school. I didn't know him at the time, but we've been in the same building for most of our lives.
That's amazing. So, OniMochi is from where we are and has been sort of in our friend group for a long time.
Yeah.
And we're happy for his friendship and happy that he can show up and help us review this game called Sifu that he picked.
Yes, he did. He picked this from our list. Kind of makes a lot of sense, and we can get into that a little bit later when we introduce him in the latter part of the show. But looking forward to seeing what he thought of it. He's also a pretty skilled gamer in general, so I'm interested to hear what his experience was like, because the last time I talked to him, he was working on 100% completion.
Whoa,
which
that's crazy.
Seems daunting.
Yes, it does. There's a lot to do in Sifu. And OniMochi plays a lot of different kinds of games. I was browsing his profile on PlayStation the other day, and it's just impressive, the range of games that he plays.
Yeah.
And then this is the last final normal episode of Season 5 of Underplayed. This will be our episode where we review Sifu, our 10th featured game. Then next episode will be episode 55, and that's going to be our Season 5 recap and reflection episode, where we will look at all the games we played for Season 5, talk about some of our favorite aspects of the games, and we'll look ahead to Season 6 as well to plan our lineup of featured games.
Yeah. So looking forward to that. It's always a fun episode. It's like a treat for ourselves at the end of the season.
It is so rewarding to do. And I am wondering if you already are thinking about your awards and even the games you want to pick for Season 6. Are you kind of thinking about that?
So I've thought of some of the rewards. I already know my Jealous game.
Really?
Yeah.
What about, there's still one you haven't heard about.
Yeah, I know.
It's Wadham too.
The thing is that I'm trying to, never mind. I already know my Jealous game is the point. But
okay.
I've actually been so busy with Sifu. I've been so behind on Sifu that I haven't had as much time as I usually do ahead of the episode 10 recording to think about that stuff.
Well, we still have around a week to figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's usually less prep than other episodes.
Yeah.
So it's nice and relaxing.
I'm
And
not worried about it.
I get so reminiscent and almost emotional in that 11th episode of the season recording.
And it's a little bit of just like a sigh of relief too. It's just like,
yes.
Oh, we did it.
Yes, we can go outside and touch grass now. And then last episode, we talked about how Steam Next Fest February 2024 edition was coming up. And as we sit down, we're on the second to last day of this Steam Next Fest. And all this past week, similar to you, sliding into home base with Sifu, I've been sliding into home base both with my secret game for this episode and also trying to play dozens of demos, because I had a hunch that demos could only appear in one Next Fest, and I actually got that confirmed from someone on Twitter who does PR for games.
Really?
And does a lot of stuff with indie games and helping developers with Next Fest stuff. They did confirm you can only enter your game into a Next Fest one time.
Wow.
And so lots of developers have to be strategic about when they do it. And apparently it is best to pick the Next Fest that is closest to your release date.
Yeah, a lot of the ones that I was really looking forward to trying after finishing Sifu, but not, are actually releasing soon. So I'm like, if I don't get it done, it's fine. I already know I want this game.
Right.
But
Yeah. So like, for example, the psychedelic Metroidvania game Ultros that we learned about from a PlayStation showcase, it releases in like 2 days from now. By the time this episode's out, that game will be out, but that game's demo is part of Next Fest right now. So they're drumming up all this attention and excitement right before the game drops. And for most developers, having that appearance at a Next Fest close to the release date means that your game is mostly finished and polished too.
Yeah.
So you're going to create a better experience for people trying your game. I've also played tons of demos of games that don't have a release date yet. You know, even in last year's Next Fest, there were tons that I still don't know when they'll come out, probably late 2024, maybe 2025. Like I have no idea when Radio the Universe is coming out, but I played that last year and it was amazing. But that game can never come to another Next Fest.
I was thinking about that game the other day.
Yeah, it's going to be incredible. It's confusing too, because a lot of demos stick around after Next Fest. There are hundreds, if not thousands of demos on Steam for indie games and such that actually technically aren't part of Next Fest, but you can still play them, you know?
Yeah.
So being part of Next Fest just means your demo gets attention on the Next Fest part of the app and the site in a way that other demos don't get. You know, it's like showcased.
Got it. Okay.
So that's what's going on. There are over 1,000 Next Fest demos. I've played several dozen, and I'd just like to quickly talk about 5 of my favorites, and I've sent you the store pages to these. These are not ranked. These are just alphabetically. The first one is Crow Country. This is from SFB Games. These are the people who did Tangle Tower, and they're going to release The Mermaid's Tongue. And simultaneously with the development of Mermaid's Tongue, they're working on Crow Country. This is a throwback, kind of top-down isometric style adventure game. It is a survival horror game. It's reminiscent of old Resident Evil games.
Yep.
And this game takes place in kind of an abandoned, dilapidated theme park. And there are like lots of cursed monsters. You find ammo for your gun, and you're finding clues and just examining the environment. And I feel like I missed little details. I feel like I could go back and like try to find little clues that I missed. It just feels like you could stumble across lots of little goodies everywhere. So I'm excited about this, and it really shows the range of SFB games. And then the next one is Duck Detective. This one's lighter in tone. This is about a duck solving a mystery. The full title is actually Duck Detective: The Secret Salami.
Okay.
And when it first was announced at Wholesome Games, I think it was just called Duck Detective, but now it has The Secret Salami on there. And in this, you're examining lots of people. You're doing deductions. And that's actually what the game calls it, deductions. And you're examining people, figuring out clues, and piecing together sentences. That's very much like Return of the Obra Dinn and even Tangle Tower, like to drop that game again. So I found this really like light and fun. The voice acting is exceptional. There are texts, dialogue conversations, and those are actually voiced. So yeah, it was really polished. It was only like 10 minutes for the demo, so it's a very digestible one. The next one is Haunty, and this is a game where you play as a ghost that can possess things. And every time you possess an object in the environment, you can play with the environment in a different way. And this game had amazing music. There was a moment where you're walking down a path and the camera's just pulling back and showing you the scale of this afterlife place, and the music's just building and building and building. And I thought it was really polished, really fun. And every time I possess something, I look at the game in a new way. The next one is Mouthwashing. This is a psychological horror game about a crew trapped on a cargo ship in space, and their captain is very injured, and you see hallucinatory, very cursed things in this game. And the meaning behind like the title, mouthwashing, is revealed in the demo. I won't spoil it here, but this is one of those games where it kind of feels like a walking simulator, but it's also got lots of dialogue and flashbacks and flash forwards. I finished this demo. I'm very curious about the story and just like all these crew members on this cargo ship. And then lastly is a game that you know about called Pepper Grinder.
Yeah, dude.
Actually, since you have seen the trailer for Pepper Grinder, can you talk about your excitement for this one?
It just looks really fun. It's using physics. So it looks like you play as a drill or someone that holds a drill, and you dive into pieces of earth that are drillable, and you use that sort of momentum like you're diving like a dolphin. You dive into this dirt, and then you come back out, you shoot up into the air, and you're like collecting strings of gems and trying to dive into the next set of diggable dirt.
Yes. So if you've ever played like Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze, or any game where you're playing like a dolphin almost, where you go into the water and you can just sort of shoot back up out of the water, that's what digging into the dirt and the sand in this game feels like. Tons of collectibles, just great, snappy presentation. I had a ton of fun playing this. This is one that I actually want to go back and like replay as far as the levels that I got to play in this thing. Yeah, we're both fans of these just fast action 2D platformers. So those are some of my favorite demos that I played in Next Fest. There are tons more that I could just name drop, but just wanted to give attention to that. And we might end up covering some of these games someday. Before we move on, if you're listening to Underplayed right now, thank you, and we love you. If you haven't already, please consider giving us a follow and a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It takes just a few seconds and goes a long way. It's time for our secret games.
The secret games, that you're playing. The secret games, the secret games.
In Secret Games, we each review an indie game we've been playing in secret since our last episode. Why are they secrets? Just because we want them to be, because it's fun. We don't discuss what we're playing in advance. I have no idea what DiscoCola's been playing. He doesn't know what I've been playing, but we both know that we've each played an indie game we haven't talked about on Underplayed before. It is the last round of Secret Games for Season 5 DiscoCola. Let the mystery be no more. Reveal your secret game for episode 54 of Underplayed.
Okay, my secret game this episode is a game that I had previously played back in 2019 with my wife.
Oh.
It is also a game I previously put on the featured game list for approval.
Oh.
But ultimately, I think we removed it because we had sort of decided it wasn't properly indie, in part because it's a spin-off of an old mainline franchise.
Oh.
However, this game has a sequel, and that sequel was in an Indie World showcase and is in indie sales all the time.
Okay.
So in my mind, this puts it back in play. My secret game this episode comes from Way Forward, and that game is River City Girls.
That is awesome synergy with Sifu.
Very good. Actually, surprisingly so. More than
Wow.
I would have expected.
Holy crap.
Yeah, River City Girls. I just sent you that trailer so you can take a closer look. So River City Girls, in this side-scrolling 16-bit inspired beat-em-up, you take control of Kyoko and or Misako, and the game opens with the two in detention at Misako's high school when suddenly Kyoko gets a mysterious text message. Their boyfriends, Kunio and Riki, have been kidnapped.
Oh no.
Now, if you recognize any of these names, this game is spinning off from the Kunio-kun or River City Ransom games. I don't actually know much about the franchise.
Yeah, I've heard of River City Ransom.
So yeah, I don't even know like the quote proper name for the franchise as a whole.
Sure.
But the wikis usually call it Kunio-kun. But what I do know is that Kunio is the main character in those games, and I believe both Kyoko and Misako both appeared in one or more of those games, just not playable. I believe.
Sure. Maybe as like background character.
Yeah,
just
or like
brief
their girlfriends or
appearances.
something.
Yes, that's good to have that context.
So anyways, after getting this text message, Kyoko and Misako fight their way out of detention because apparently that's what everybody does in this town is fight. It's kind of like Scott Pilgrim where it's totally normal to just have massive battles with vast collateral damage. From there, it works pretty much like any beat 'em up. You defeat waves of enemies before you can move on to the next room until you eventually encounter a boss. You use a mix of light, heavy, and special attacks to defeat enemies, gain experience, unlock new moves, and make your way around River City to find out what happened to Ricky and Kunio. And maybe you complete some miscellaneous tasks and fetch quests along the way. And it's pretty straightforward. It's a 16-bit inspired beat-em-up game and does what beat-em-up games do, but also adds a bit more for the modern era. And I'll tackle some of those modern aspects when I get into like my likes and dislikes, but I really don't have much more that I need to set up the game. But here's what I like about River City Girls. First and foremost, the art. I am a sucker for great pixel art, especially 16-bit era stylized pixel art. But I think the pixel art here is great, and this is especially impressive to me as most of WayForward's games are side-scrollers that opt for more hand-drawn sprites instead of pixel art. But it's great to see that their pixel art game is on point, and I wish that they did more of it. This game also mixes in comic book style scenes and anime style portraits for dialogue that happens during combat, and some actual like anime intros for boss, all of which look really great. The next thing on my likes list is one of the modern editions. This game is voice acted, and it's actually voice acted very well. Both of our main characters are voiced by actresses with several dozens of video game and anime credits under their belts. I haven't really kept up with the world of anime very well for the last 15 years, so I don't know like which ones are the big hitters. But you've got Kyoko. She's voiced by Kira Buckland. She's appeared in Chris Tales, which is a future featured game, 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim. And she's actually 2B in Nier Automata.
Oh. Wow.
And then Misako is voiced by Kaylee Mills. She appears in Gal Guardian's Demon Purge, a game that will appear on the show someday.
Whoa, spoiler.
Neo, The World Ends With You, and Genshin Impact, and many more.
I've heard of all those.
Yep.
Yeah.
There are several other voiced characters. One of my favorite voice actresses, Cristina Valenzuela, is in this, and she also sings the main theme. A lot of minor characters and all the bosses are voice acted. They're all just like great performances. There are some actors in here that are just like, first and foremost, in my opinion, meant to be cameos, like Jacksepticeye. But he's even really like nailing it in this game, and that's coming from. I think I've seen like one Jacksepticeye video, so I'm not fanboying
fan.
here.
Yeah.
He did a great job.
Wow. And that's impressive because just my perception of beat 'em ups is that they're largely visual, and we're seeing text conversations on screen maybe, and usually not voice acted in the ones I've played.
Right, and that's true, I think, most of the time, but the game really allows you to stay in the action while also getting exposition.
Nice.
So it works out really well. In general, the controls feel pretty good. There are a few things here and there that could use work, and I'll talk about that later on, but overall, wailing on enemies is satisfying. Comboing light and heavy attacks to maximize the smackdown is really fun. There are a lot of things to collect in River City Girls. You collect new moves using money drops. You collect equipment by beating bosses, doing miscellaneous tasks, or buying them in shops. You can also find and destroy busts of the Yakuza boss. But perhaps the coolest, or at least the most unique collectible in this game, is the recruits. Sometimes the minor enemies will stop attacking you and beg for mercy, and you can like choose to knock them out, gain their experience and their money. But you can also choose to show them mercy, and they will act as like a special little summon attack, and this can really help you out of some jams if you start to get overwhelmed. But the coolest part is that each enemy type comes in a variety of colors and styles, But the pause menu also keeps track of these for you, and each different variant has a different name and a little bit of flavor text bio to go along with it. So this adds
Oh, wow.
this adds some significance to the waves of like samey looking enemies that beat 'em ups have. It doesn't add a ton of significance, but it adds some, and it gives me a little reward for doing something that is often otherwise just a tedious part of the game.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll just get the urge to like stop my current task and try to farm for recruits that I'm missing.
Wow.
So that's really
cool.
satisfying.
That is an awesome collectible. And I do see a little bit of that in the trailer where it says, "Have mercy, recruit your fallen foes."
This is a small thing that I like, but I like that each shop and shopkeeper is unique. This is just a way for WayForward's character design muscles to flex. There's some real cuties and badasses in these shops, and I'm here for it. It just adds a little pepper of heart to the city. I want to know what they're about. Like, does Onizuka look so tired because he has kids at home? Does Saori want to hang out after work? What's her favorite candy? There are also apparently Double Dragon cameos in the shops. I don't really know anything about Double Dragon, though.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks.
I played some NES emulations way back in the day, and I tried tons of like old classic games. I know I played Double Dragon, but I just wouldn't be able to recognize them myself.
I know that the main characters are in it, but there's a couple other Double Dragon characters that I just don't know. I'm sorry. I think the thing that I love the absolute most about this game, apart from maybe the pixel art, is the music. Megan McDuffie is the composer and then the vocalist on some of the tracks that have vocals. And all of these songs are awesome. It is definitely more modern sounding music than you might expect looking at the visuals. But it still fits and I love it. This music is great. All of it plays well on the radio. I also have to mention here Chipzil, a chiptune composer. She did all of the boss battle themes, and those are all really intense. We also have the main theme, as I mentioned earlier, sung by Christina Valenzuela. I love her singing voice so much, as well as her acting voice. And then the credits theme has popular YouTuber Nate Wants to Battle. It's all great stuff, and they really put a lot into the music on River City Girls. But I really have to give the flowers to Megan McDuffie here. She did such an incredible job. It's so good. Almost no game is perfect, though, and there are things I don't always love about River City Girls. First, the parry in River City Girls is pretty worthless. If you do happen to pull it off, it does much more noticeable effect than our featured game today, but the window for actually getting the parry is minuscule.
It's like a few frames.
Yeah, and apart from a very brief stun of your enemy, you don't really get anything for it. I did have to parry 20 times for a trophy.
Oh, jeez.
I chose a screen with weaker enemies so I wouldn't
Not in a row, right?
No, not in a row.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are games with trophies like that.
Well, I was worried that was the case because I was like, I swear to God, I've parried 20 times already.
Oh, no. Yeah, sometimes the counter doesn't work too.
But I chose a screen with weaker enemies so I wouldn't take too much damage, and I just farmed this, and then I never used the parry again.
Yeah. I've been known to do that for certain weird trophies.
Next up is when you're backtracking through areas where you've already like played and beaten the waves of enemies proper. Enemies do still show up. This is in part to help you like farm money or experience or recruits. But I think the rate at which these enemies show up is a bit high. There's usually 3 or 4 enemies spawning right away. And then if I take a second to breathe or think about where I'm going, even more will be showing up. So yes, if my task is just getting from point A to point B, I can usually just run past them with no issue, but some enemy types can be really aggro. Others will throw projectiles that can just like land right in front of me, and that just really slows me down. And once you stop running, it can sometimes be hard to get going again, and that's in part because of my next and probably biggest complaint. This game employs a double tap to run.
Oh no.
I hate double tap to run.
I'm having flashbacks to Axiom Verge.
I hate it. It's not fun. Sometimes you can run on accident and run off a ledge, and like, man, these girls run really fast. But most of the time, I'm just fumbling my thumbs just to get my character to run. And in the time that it took me to start running, I've been kicked in the head. I wish it was just more like the run in Sifu.
Hold down a button.
Yeah, but I also even have problems with that run a little bit too.
Did you look up like options in the pause menu? Was there? I assume you did.
I didn't notice any like control switching options, but double
Okay.
tap was, I don't think, would have been among them.
Mm.
But yeah, I hate double tap. Yeah, I think double tap to run should be outlawed. Like it's just not
It should
not
be.
not a great.
Well, if you're going
mechanic.
to have another option to hold
Yeah.
a button, I think.
Speaking of the pause menu, it can be pretty laborious to navigate. Your pause menu is your smartphone, but it has a lot of things to cycle through. It has your stats, it has your collected recruits, it has a map, it has your equipment, and it has a list of your moves, and they're all on different screens that you have to tab through with your L1 or R1. I don't know if maybe the scrolling just isn't fast enough or what, but I just dreaded having to look at my list of recruits and then swap over to my map. Though I do have to give a good shout out to a nice attention to detail here. The character you are playing as changes the pause menu. Remember, this is your phone
Okay.
that you're looking at. So this
Looking at,
gives
like different wallpaper.
exactly.
And stuff.
This gives extra depth. Misako, our grumpy tomboyish fighter, has a phone with multiple cracks in it and a plain black case.
Oh, that's so much like little storytelling.
Exactly. And Kyoko, our bright and bubbly fighter, her phone is a cute little teddy bear case. And there's even a secret playable character, and one of them has a flip phone. So I will be playing as that person very soon.
You're making me wish that in Elba, a wildlife adventure, that Elba's phone had like a cute little case around it.
Yeah.
That could have been something. But
Oh,
yeah. Still an amazing game. But
The next thing, the leveling in this game is a bit like odd. Like the max level any character can be is level 30, but like you don't gain access to anything except a trophy by reaching this level. There's no ultimate move or anything as far as I know. The last level-based unlock is at level 12.
what? That's a long distance between
yeah.
the last upgrade and the max.
I know. You do increase your stats each level up, and that goes all the way up to level 30, but the enemies also scale with you to a point, I think. I don't know if the bosses do or not, but I beat this game relatively handily at level 22 or 23. And the amount of fighting you have to do in higher levels gets really exhausting, especially if you stay on the same screen to continue farming enemies. They will pretty quickly just start yielding 0 experience. Now, again, credit where credit is due here. If you are playing solo, quest-based and boss-based experience goes to the character you aren't playing as. So I went through this game solo as Misako, but by the end of the game, even though I hadn't used Kyoko at all, she was at level 11. So this gives me a much appreciated head start in like leveling up for Kyoko. But it's all still like such a drag that it doesn't feel worth it to really maximize. A couple other small things. Judging depth can be hard, but that's kind of the case in a lot of these side-scrolling beat-em-ups. But yeah, many times I'll come running up at an enemy to try and prepare to do a running-based attack, and I'll totally miss because I just wasn't in the same planar depth as the enemy. And then this last thing is a really, really small thing that almost no one will care about. Your equipment, or they're called accessories in this game, they sit in your inventory in the order you collect them. They don't have a set order like, say, the charms do in Hollow Knight. This is actually an issue for me in one of the Shantae games too, which also comes from Way Forward. Small thing, means nothing, but as someone that like seeks out that perfect save file, I don't know what the correct order is to collect these accessories, and so I'm just like, I'm partially crippling myself to avoid collecting any of them until I can route a more meaningful order to collect these stupid things. Oh, and also, I wish I could equip more of them at one time. You can only equip 2 at a time. And yes, like, many of these are like bras or bottoms, and you probably wouldn't wear more than 2 bras at any given time, I assume. But I just don't feel like I'm making the most out of these items. To summarize my thoughts, I guess I would say that, like most multiplayer beat-em-ups, it is most enjoyed with a friend, and it has a lot of the same trappings and tropes as others in its genre. However, for those looking for a technically challenging, high-skill input game, you will probably not find it here. I think this game does have style and substance, but its style is really what stands out the most. The character designs are beautiful, modernized take on characters that appeared in those original games in the Kunio-kun series. The music adds so much to the experience and is also a great listen on its own. It's worth playing, it's worth beating. I'd say it's worth getting the secret ending too, but most people will probably find completing the game especially tedious. I had a great time playing this with my wife in 2019, and I still had a pretty decent time solo in 2024. I put this in my top 100 next to Solar Ash, so I'm going to give it the same score I gave Solar Ash, which is an 8.5.
Awesome. Yeah, I sounds like a lot of the music and just the personality and the characters are doing a lot to influence your love of this game. And anytime you play a game with somebody else, especially your wife who doesn't play a lot of games, I have to ask the question, can you describe that experience a little bit more of just what it is like sitting down for couch co-op with this game? I know it's been a few years.
Yeah, so if you've played any just multiplayer beat 'em up, if you went to a Chuck E. Cheese and played Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time or whatever.
That was core memory unlocked. Disco. Yes.
It's generally the same idea, though the one thing that you do have here that changes the game is that you can revive your fallen comrade, like you can in like Cuphead or even Scott Pilgrim, which is another beat 'em up game. So that really eases the burden, I would say, and can really help you just get through the game much faster. But in general, it doesn't feel too different, except that you're just playing with someone that you enjoy being around.
Okay. And then you mentioned a couple times that this is similar to other beat 'em up games. Like if you've played another beat 'em up game, you kind of understand what's going on here. Just in general, with all the beat 'em up games you've played, is this up there as one of your favorites?
I think so. I haven't played any for Underplayed, so my top 100 list is skewed more towards
indie games and
games that I've played for Underplayed.
Yeah.
And even if I have played games like Scott Pilgrim, I don't think I've even thought to try and rank that on my list anywhere. It's pretty close to the same as a lot of them for me. But yeah, the style really does a lot of work here. So like this and the Scott Pilgrim game both have great pixel art and they both have great music. Just going to shout out Anna Monoguchi anytime I can. Did an awesome soundtrack in Scott Pilgrim.
Yes.
So.
And their non-soundtrack music is
they're
amazing
just,
too.
Incredible musicians.
Well, I think you've done a great job justifying this as a vetted indie game, and I'm glad you did get to play it for the Sifu episode. Very fitting.
Yeah.
Where can you play River City Girls?
River City Girls is available on Android, iOS, Windows, and then both digitally and physically with the limited run games copies on Xbox One, which they don't have very many of those, Switch, PS4, which is how I played it, and PS5.
It is time for my secret game. My secret game is called The Wild at Heart. Have you heard of The Wild at Heart?
You have taken a lot of my Halloween candy this season. I actually already have The Wild at Heart.
Really?
Yeah.
You do?
I do.
Is it available physically?
It is.
It is?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I
don't
God.
think it was released from one of those super limited print games, but it does have a physical PS4 edition.
Okay. Well, I just sent you the trailer. And yeah, you probably don't need to see the trailer. You've probably watched it, but it could be a good reminder because this game is pretty big. There's a lot going on in this game, and I think the trailer does show off some of those features. So this is a 2021 adventure game. It was developed by Moonlight Kids. I think this is their only game, and they're working on an unknown next project. And it's published by Humble Games. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, "Wield an ever-growing herd of quirky creatures to rebuild broken paths, battle perilous beasts, and solve peculiar puzzles in a rich, interconnected world. Join two young runaways as they unravel the mysteries of a lost realm in this nostalgic storybook fantasy," end quote. The Wild at Heart is a top-down adventure game with this hand-drawn storybook appearance. We control Wake and Kirby, two best friends in the town of Willowvale, who come up with this plan to escape to the woods together. Wake and Kirby each have troubled lives at home. I think they're like next-door neighbors or something like that. And you see glimpses of their home lives in their dreams. And this plan of running away to the woods would allow them to escape all that. You begin by only able to control Wake, the 12-year-old boy. Kirby's a 10-year-old girl. And Wake ventures into the woods with his homemade invention, the Gust Buster, which allows him to suck in air to collect things. It's kind of just this big vacuum cleaner that he wears as a backpack.
And he's not the one named Kirby. Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good observation. No, he's Wake. That's good. But you're using this to like suck up leaves just to clear paths and just to test it out at first. So Wake's walking through the woods and he follows his map, but he gets lost and he ends up in this magical realm called the Deep Woods, which is filled with dangerous woodland creatures. We've got, for instance, mushroom warriors called gloomcaps. There are gum blops, which are these slimes that want to eat you. There are bloat toads, which are what they sound like, large toads that leap in the air to try to attack you. There are many more than that. And not long after venturing into this strange world, Wake meets a magician named Greycoat, who is the leader of a clan of protectors of the Deep Woods called the Green Shields. So the Green Shields have been looking into this malicious entity called the Never, which has been cursing the forest. And when it gets to be nighttime in the forest, the Never emerges and can actually attack Wake. So you really like see the Never up close when it does become dark. And central to the inhabitants of the Deep Woods are these small seed-shaped beings called spritlings. And this is where the heart of the gameplay comes in The Wild at Heart. Greycoat needs Wake's assistance with finding missing members of the Green Shields and stopping the Never. And Wake uses these spritlings that follow him around alongside his Gustbuster to explore the Deep Woods and to solve puzzles, to unlock upgrades, and just to discover more about this magical world and even Wake himself. And about a third of the way into the game, you reunite with Kirby, who's also in the Deep Woods, and she carries a magical lantern that has different properties than Wake's Gustbuster. So you can control both of these kids. You switch between them all the time to perform their different powers, but both of them can have spritlings follow them, and they can throw spritlings between each other. Wake and Kirby discover various regions together. There are coastal areas. There are lots of forested areas. There are some snowy and ice areas. And everything about this game is carried by this feeling of dreaminess and magic and imagination. We meet fantastical creatures of all shapes and sizes. Wake and Kirby use the spritlings to do tasks and break obstacles, carry items, and defeat enemies. And this is where I want to say that this game feels like the setting and the themes of something like Over the Garden Wall or maybe Where the Wild Things Are, mixed with the gameplay of Pikmin. The spritlings in this game are basically like the Pikmin you run into.
I was hoping we were going to mention Pikmin at some point.
Yes, I might mention Pikmin a few more times. So Wake and Kirby are the Captain Olimar of this game. The spritlings are just like the Pikmin in that dozens of them can follow you around. You can throw them to give them orders. There are different kinds of spritlings. There are the twiglings, which are like the standard ones. The emberlings are fire-based. The shiverlings are ice-based. The barblings can cling onto things and destroy crystal obstacles. And lunalings are strong at night and immune to dangers the other spritlings aren't. And the Green Shields have this camp where you can pick up tasks, buy and sell items you find, purchase upgrades, and just learn more about the lore of the Deep Woods. The Wild at Heart has crafting too. As you defeat enemies, you find parts all over the world. You craft potions to augment your spritling's abilities. You can craft healing items for Wake and Kirby. You can collect glint, which lets you hatch new spritlings. So you collect these seeds that they can grow from, and together with glint, you can basically rebuild your army if you lose a bunch of spritlings in a battle or something like that. And there are collectibles, including missing cats. And, yes, and lots of them. And journal pages. There is a day-night cycle. When it gets to be dark, again, the Never attacks Wake and Kirby, and they can go to sleep in a tent to pass the time. Or you can actually choose to play through the nighttime. It's just that you'll be constantly attacked by these Never creatures. So this is a big game with lots of mechanics and lore going on. It's very hard to summarize, but the elevator pitch is that it is over the garden wall meets Pikmin, so I don't think I'm the first person to say that.
Probably not.
So you already know a lot about this game.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but
Okay.
I do own it.
So I actually am curious what drew you to the game, or what did you know about the game already?
In general, it was mostly because of the art style. Surprise, shocker. I bought a game without research based on a cute art style. But really, it does have a lot to do with that. It reminded me of this game that I bought before my kid was even born from Limited Run Games. I was like, I'm going to play this with my kid when they can play video games. It's called Knights and Bikes.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the art style is very similar.
Yes.
I fell in love at first sight.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a lot of children's storybooks that have lots of illustration. It's a very autumnal looking game in a lot of places. And here's what I loved about The Wild at Heart. This game has so much going on, and that sounds overwhelming, all that stuff I just described, but all of it works so well. This is a touching story of childhood and belonging and facing fears. I love the world here. It is hard to pick an environment I dislike because they all have their own ideas and characters going on. You'll go to all the different areas of the deep woods, and you'll run into minor characters and certain obstacles that feel different than other places. So the puzzles feel fresh nearly every time. Every time you collect a new spriteling, you start with only the twiglings, the kind of more standard ones, and they are fast workers, but they don't have any like elemental properties, right? They can go into like poisonous mushrooms and destroy those. That's about all they can do that's special. But you start collecting all the other kinds of spritelings I mentioned. And each time you find a new breed, you get a new power to bypass an obstacle you might have seen hours ago. So the game can kind of feel like a Metroidvania in a way. I was running into things like barrels with X's on them, and like they're covered in nets. And I could tell they were special, but I was trying to throw my spritelings at them. Nothing was happening. Kirby and Wake couldn't get into the barrels. But then I eventually found the barblings. And these are the purple spritelings. The barblings latch onto the net of the barrels and can pull them down, and this is what unlocks doors. So every time I get a new spriteling, I'm looking at the world in a new way, and that moment is just one of like several revelations I had about, this is what the game wants me to look for now. I have a new sort of visual to look for in the environment. Wake's Gustbuster and Kirby's Lantern can be used independently. This makes puzzles really interesting. So sometimes Wake needs to go to a wheel and use his Gustbuster to spin it. And while he's actively spinning it, you can press the swap button, and we go over to Kirby, and we control Kirby while Wake is keeping the wheel spinning, which unlocked a gate. And now Kirby can maybe go through that gate and also take some of the spritelings with her, and then unlock a platform and throw the spritelings onto that platform, and then you switch back to Wake, and he gets those spritelings on the platform so he can do something else. So like you're switching between the characters, and you're throwing spritelings back and forth in a way that just always feels dynamic and more complicated than just step on a switch to open door.
Right.
Sometimes it can be that simple, but there is a lot of variety with the puzzle design.
Yeah, that's such a more involved way to work with two simultaneously playable characters, whereas like something in 2D and top D, it's like finish the thing you're doing as 2D, swap, then do the thing as top D, and then swap. But you can have someone doing something continuously while you're swapping out. That's so great.
And a lot of the time you're walking around, it is both Kirby and Wake walking together with all their spritelings. So that's convenient too. You don't have to keep swapping to both of them to catch the one you weren't controlling up to the other one.
Right.
It's just that you can choose to split off from the group as one of them at certain points, and that makes the puzzles make sense, I guess. And each area requires significant time to figure out all the paths in the puzzles. They're not huge areas, but they have paths that sort of snake around, and they have doors that you don't really understand at first. There are things like those barrels that you don't really know how to interact with yet until you get the right thing. And so you're walking around these moderately sized places, you're spending quite a bit of time to figure all this stuff out, and it's all rewarding. If I got stuck, I usually figured it out later. I didn't look up anything in this game, and that felt really good. Shortcuts are abound, both within the regions and between the regions. There are some shortcuts that just get you to a high ledge faster, or maybe that unlock a door that connects a region to another region. And I found that really great. There's just tons of shortcuts, and I love shortcuts in games. I think the character designs are so detailed. There is a green shield called Crow's Nest who sells crafting items from their shop called the Mystic Cookery. And they're dressed as like a plague doctor with a witch's hat.
Yeah, I'm seeing that.
And
in the trailer.
there's like a crow nesting on top of the hat, and they have a bandolier full of colorful potions. There's also a green shield called Litter Box, and they're the person you're finding the cats for. All these kittens are lost and like hiding in cardboard boxes all around the forest. And when you find the cats, they return to Litter Box. There's also two twins called Can Dance and Can't Dance. And you would love these two. They have tree branches growing out of their heads, and one of them's smarter than the other. And it's just so charming. Those are just a few of the green shields in this camp. And also, I want to shout out the music by Amos Roddy. It is dreamlike and serene and sort of forlorn. It is a very fitting soundscape for children lost in the woods with magical creatures all around them. It just sounds, it's kind of like lo-fi electronic music.
Okay.
But it sounds very woodland. I was listening to the soundtrack outside of playing the game. It's relaxing music. It's contemplative, meditative music. I think the game is also really thoughtful with the tools and the controls that help out the player instead of getting in the player's way. There are just lots of quality of life things going on in The Wild at Heart. Like when you withdraw spritlings from your bank, you can select one kind at a time and just take out like all your emberlings, your fire-based ones, or you can select all 5 types and withdraw all at the same time. So you can say like, I want 5 of each of my types. And so they'll all come out at the same time.
That's such a small thing, but it like goes a long way in saving time.
And there are more things like that, like you can hotkey potions to a directional button from your inventory. I was doing that with potions that make my spritlings invulnerable and more powerful for a brief period. I would just have them stand in a circle around me, throw those 2 potions onto them, and it does like a spread effect. So anyone caught in the radius will be affected by the potion for like 60 seconds. So that's nice. I don't have to pause my game, go into my inventory, select the potion, then throw it. If you lose a spritling in the world, you can revisit this station and pay some of that glint currency to warp them back to you. So you do lose some spritlings here and there. It didn't happen to me a ton, but if you have a handful somewhere out in the world and you don't want to go find them, you can go to the station, pay some money, and they come back.
Yeah.
Also, you have a box for storing all the items you can't fit in your pockets, and you can stockpile as much as you want in this game, as far as I can tell. That's really nice. Crafting items for the first time creates a recipe you can navigate to, and you don't need the ingredients on your person to craft items. So all your crafting ingredients can be in your storage, not in your on-person inventory.
Yeah.
Love that kind of thing. Kind of similar to what was going on in Haiku the Robot, where I could store my money in the bank, and my money's just available everywhere. The map allows you to place icons too. So I was going into my map. If I found an obstacle I didn't understand, I could pick from one of tons of icons, and I would put that icon on the map in that spot. And that's how I know to go back there later. So those are like most of my things I like with this game. I could probably keep coming up with things I love. I did have dislikes. Because this game is so large, it's going to have things that just don't work as well. Chief among my dislikes is just that this game, for my taste, is a few hours too long.
Mm-hmm.
It took about 11 hours for me to finish this game.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that it was this long, and I was like, oh, really? Why?
I think it's just a tad too long. I don't think it's like double the length it should be or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just played Pikmin 1 for the first time last year. That game took me about 5 hours to beat. And it was a breezy experience, and it was perfect. And I think maybe if this game was like, I don't know, 10%, 20% shorter, maybe that would be the right amount. So I didn't get bored, but the loop of discovering the new Emberlings and finding key items sort of started to announce itself. So I started to sense when I was about halfway through a region and then like almost done with a region. Upgrades can get very expensive for people who want to unlock everything before finishing the story. It is not difficult to unlock everything. It just takes like tons of exploration and basically going for 100%, but you're not likely to do that before you finish the game. So if you want to max out your pocket size and your gust buster sucking duration and your health, all that stuff, you're probably going to have to pick and choose what you want to upgrade, which is kind of nice too. Because it's giving you options for how you want to customize yourself. Some enemies are annoying to deal with. There's an enemy called the Fey Fly who flies around in the air, picks up your spritlings and throws them at you or just kills them, crushes them.
Oh.
And they're very unpleasant to look at. And also you have to throw your spritlings at it to like knock it out of the air. And then it takes a lot of hits to die once it's on the ground. So sometimes I'd be swarmed by like 4 or 5 of these Fey Flies. Yeah, and they're just destroying my army.
I think I'm seeing one of those in this trailer.
Yeah.
And it looks daunting, just the one of them.
And I played this on sort of the normal difficulty. There's a simpler difficulty. So I'm sure like if you don't want to deal with all that stuff, you can knock that difficulty down and you'd be just fine. And then lastly, the game locked up once where I went to sleep to pass the nighttime and I was stuck on the loading screen of Wake and Kirby, just sort of sitting on the ground looking at each other. There was another moment, I guess, where a Fey Fly got stuck in the world. Like I had defeated it, but it was like still there and it was just kind of frozen. So just little things like that, little glitches like that, where I had to like reset the game. But overall, what?
I was going to say, I've encountered more bugs this season than I have any other season as well.
Interesting.
So I won in one of our games today, and I can talk about that a little bit later. But
okay, yeah. So I think in a game that this large, it's probably bound to happen. And it's, all these dislikes ultimately are kind of quibbles. The game length is my biggest problem. At the end of the day, The Wild at heart is a gift of a game with its detailed lore and rewarding puzzles and plentiful shortcuts. It has lovable characters and a gameplay loop that keeps me wanting to play for hours at a time. I would play this game for 2 or 3 hours at a time and did not feel the time really pass. I do have a handful of dislikes. They're mostly minor. There's a lot going on here, and the adventure is sizable. If you take your time, you can really get wrapped up in this game, which did happen to me. I'm going to rate it a 9 out of 10.
That's exactly what I guessed. I'm so stoked to hear that. Like I said, you've been taking my Halloween candy this season.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
I'm so sorry. I didn't know this was like even on your radar.
No, yeah, it was even like I have these like tabs open on my laptop here, and the first like 12 of them are just like indie games that I will buy when I have the money for it. And like Wild at Heart was on there for months.
Dang.
So
wow.
I'm glad you played it. I guess going off of having played tabs this season, it's a game where you have a lot of elements on the screen at once. In this game, you're going to have a lot of spritlings on the screen at one time. Does the gameplay or like performance suffer the more spritlings you have? Is there any noticeable slowdown, or is this pretty well optimized?
I had no performance issues, period.
Okay.
This game runs beautifully, perfectly.
Cool.
I had no issues. Yeah, I was surprised. I had I think the most spritlings I could have on screen at once. I think I hit a cap of like 60 or 70. And I did have that many out at one time, and it was no problem.
Oh, wow.
And there was a battle where they were fighting a huge like stone creature, and I was multitasking, and yeah, I never had anything like that. It's just that there was one time where an enemy got frozen in the world, and then another time where the game just froze in between days.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then I guess I'm just a little bit curious about how dark this game gets. You have the Never, they're kind of creepy. Some of these more friendly creatures even have a little bit of a haunting sort of aura to them. And then you talked about the troubled home lives. So I'm wondering just like, how far does this game go?
Yeah.
Are we theorizing that these kids might be dead in limbo, like you might be with Over the Garden Wall?
No, I will say no. It doesn't get like that dark as Limbo. I would give a slight content warning for like troubled home life. You don't see major scenes of like abuse or anything, but there's some stuff about neglect
implied. Yeah.
You see those scenes when the kids go to sleep. Sometimes your game will just show a brief scene of them sitting at their campsite, but sometimes, depending on how much progress you've made, going to sleep will trigger a cutscene. And the cutscenes are very brief, but this is when you're in a dreamscape with these kids and you see a glimpse into something that's going on at home. Nothing is ever terribly upsetting for me, but I'm someone who hasn't experienced that in my own life.
Right.
I don't think this will be terribly upsetting for most people.
And it probably doesn't even go as far as like our last featured game, Space for the Unbound.
No, I don't think it goes in a direction that requires a content warning that seriously.
Gotcha.
There is some slightly mature language, like at one point, one of the kids calls the other a dumbass, and it kind of comes up later. So there's like little language things here and there. So it kind of strays into, I'd say it's comparable to almost like Spiritfarer.
Okay.
You know how Spiritfarer felt a little bit more grown up than just purely a children's game? I'd say it's that right balance of childlike and appropriate for most ages, but then sometimes also talking about some more serious things.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, obviously, this is a game that I've been looking forward to playing myself. It maybe wasn't going to be like a season 6 secret game, but maybe like 7.
Yeah, sometime in the future.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope you do get to play it, because of all my secret games this season, I don't think I like want you to play any one game more than the other this season, but I do hope this is one you check out at some point, because I think you will jive with it.
Definitely intend to.
Cool. And this game is playable on PC, Mac, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, which is the version I played, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. Those are our secret games, River City Girls and The Wild at Heart. We will move on to our review of Sifu. It is our featured game. Sifu is a beat-em-up game first released in 2022. It was developed and published by Slow Clap with publishing help by Kepler Interactive. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, Sifu is a realistic third-person brawler with tight kung fu combat mechanics and cinematic martial arts action, embarking you on a path for revenge, end quote. Joining us for our review today, we have a visual designer. His taste in games couldn't be finer. He's a person we know since way long ago. I'm talking about the Sifu player, the art purveyor, the enemy slayer, OniMochi. What's going on?
That's the best intro I've ever had.
That's what we do here. If the rest of our podcast sucks, at least we have great intros.
No,
we start strong.
Gassing me up here. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Listeners might recognize your name from our credits because you helped us design our visual identity.
I did.
Yeah, which Disco and you were in communication about like really early on. So thank you for working with us.
Oh, I love doing that kind of stuff. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Also designed, without even a question from me, designed my little DiscoCola can and just like,
yeah, that's right, I did.
sent it to me one day. I'm like, oh, brilliant. Now I don't have to even think about it. So
that's awesome.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I see that all the time because I am subscribed to DiscoCola on Twitch, and that's one of his emotes. So I'm spamming that DiscoCola can in tons of chats these days. So lots of people have seen your work, maybe if you didn't even know it, when it comes to the Disco can.
Nice.
Wanted to ask you, can you just tell us about yourself and your visual design background?
Yeah. So I've been doing graphic design for a number of years. I went to school for it, and I've done a variety of different projects. At one point, we even started a craft beer magazine, and we did that for a number of years, and that was really successful. A little too successful. It got to a point where we couldn't afford it anymore.
Oh, wow.
We couldn't keep up with the demand and the print costs and stuff. It just got too much.
Right.
That's a testament to the good work you all did.
Yeah.
It was good. Unfortunately, like print media just is too expensive now.
I do
Yeah.
kind of keep all of the ones that I did have like a collection, so they're
Yeah.
just hiding away somewhere.
But other than that, then I've worked on a number of other things, doing just logos and website designs for people. I've worked with a couple breweries to do like beer cans design for them.
And just going back to like when we were younger, like you've always been known just
I was always that
As-
kid.
as the
yeah,
artist,
it was
yeah.
always drawing in the
The
back.
artist.
yeah.
Yeah, you're Kuroki, the artist. Huh?
Yeah.
And then, can you tell us what the name OniMochi means? This is sort of your pseudonym, right?
Right. Yeah. So I had a few other names I went through before, but this one really stuck with me, I think, because I have a large interest in a lot of like, especially like Japanese culture. I've spent a lot of time over there in Japan, and like I just love everything about it. And I'm also a big food enthusiast, so mochis, I love mochis. And then one day I drew this little mochi with oni horns, like a little demon, and I just like, this is a great little mascot. So I just kind of from there started using it for everything.
Love that.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Can you also just describe your gaming journey, your gaming history, your interests when it comes to video games?
Yeah. So I think like most of us here, I've been gaming since I was a kid. I remember when I was young, my aunt bought me my first Super NES, and it was pretty much from there, just escalated.
Mhm.
So playing Super Mario Brothers, and then next thing I know, I had a Game Boy, and then I had, PlayStation, Xbox, and then I get into PC gaming, and then just like everything just elevated.
Is there a type or genre or even like a developer that you identify with the most?
There's quite a few actually, but one of my biggest ones I can think of is Super Giant Games is probably one of my favorite ones out there.
Hell
Nice. Yeah.
They have, I think, just the perfect team. All their designs, from their music to their art design to their writing, world building, even the gameplay mechanics, or just everything, I think is just so perfect.
Awesome.
Nice. Yeah.
Obviously, we agree here. We've reviewed 2 Super Giant games here on Underplayed, and they've only got a couple under their belt, so we've done a good amount of their library at
Yeah.
this point.
Hades 2 is coming out in, I think, early access this year.
Yeah,
So we'll be looking forward to your thoughts on that if you play that.
yeah,
For sure.
for sure.
So we will now set up Sifu. We will ask you, OniMochi, about your thoughts on Sifu in just a moment, but we have to give context about what's going on in Sifu. So Sifu is a third-person action game set in China. The word Sifu means martial arts master, and you begin the prologue playing as Yang, the game's antagonist, which is something I didn't expect before I started up this game. But Yang is a disgraced former student of a martial arts Sifu and is seeking revenge alongside 4 accomplices. There's Feijar the botanist, Shan the fighter, Kuroki the artist, and Jin Fang the CEO. And together, these 5 defeat all the students of this martial arts school, and Yang fights and kills the Sifu, and witnessing all this is the Sifu's only child, which you can select to be either a boy or a girl. And Yang's group kills the child, but the child is wielding a magic talisman that resurrects them, and they see their father has died, and they spend the next 8 years in training to seek revenge on the 5 people who infiltrated the school. Each of these people in this gang are living in a hideout with their own disciples to defeat, and you have a residence called the Wuguan, from which you select the first hideout and fight your way through to the boss to defeat them, and then move on to the next hideout with the next member. The progression is we go to a place called the Squats, and then the club, the museum, the tower, and the sanctuary. Your goal is ultimately to face Yang in the sanctuary and get revenge. So DiscoCola, let's go into gameplay, like combat, shrines, the aging system,
Yeah.
the skills. How do we interact with this game?
So in Sifu, you have your combination of light attacks, your heavy attacks, and you can pair those in a number of different ways based on whether you're running or whether you're blocking or how many times you do a light and then a heavy. You mentioned shrines. Shrines will be placed throughout the hideouts in particular places, usually 3. I think sometimes there's 4 in a level. And when you get there, You access it, it refills your health, and then you can choose to invest in one thing that will become permanent. It's based on either your age or your experience that you've collected in that level, or your score that you've accumulated in that level. Score is calculated based on how fast you move, whether or not you taunt enemies, the way you take them down, and mostly
whether you get hit.
Yep, and I think mostly it's based on whether you get hit or how fast you're going, and those will play the biggest part in your score. And then you can also access the skill tree from the shrine, where you can invest experience points into new moves. These will either be temporary, or you can invest in that same skill over and over again to unlock that permanently, and then you will no longer have to invest experience into those skills the next time you play the hideout, because most likely you will be playing these hideouts multiple times.
Yes.
And then you mentioned the aging system and the death system. This game's core identity, I think, comes from the death and aging system. Bopo mentioned it in the prologue. Your character dies and you come back to life because of this special amulet that you have. Anytime that you die, you will age at least 1 year. And if you die without getting that counter reset, it adds another year. So maybe you die once, you age a year. If you die again pretty much right away, you're going to age 2 years. And then if you die again, you age just 3 years. So you get
So it gets kind of exponential.
That snowballs pretty fast. You do get access to the ability to, decrease that age counter so that you can get it back down to 1 and you'll only age 1 year.
Yeah.
But
and I think it's when you hit like 80 or 75, somewhere around there, that's when your game ends. So you can't just keep aging and aging and aging forever.
If you hit the age 70, after you've hit the age 70 and
that's
you
your
revive,
last decade.
You die.
Yeah.
That's the end.
There's also just different maneuvers, like you can block, you can parry, you can dodge, and you can avoid attacks. There are lots of different ways to react to attacks coming your way. And as you deal out damage, you are weakening opponent's structure. There's a quality in this game called structure, where if you break someone's structure, you sort of open them up to attacks. Your own structure can be broken. And then as you avoid attacks and make attacks yourself, you build up focus, and you can spend focus to unleash some quick moves on people to open them up.
This is like a special move, sort of like a final move,
yes,
in a way, and you earn it.
And a lot of those moves can be unlocked with those skills.
Yep.
The experience spending that you talked about too. That is a great overview. I would also say there are melee weapons we can pick up.
Oh yeah,
that's true. We can throw enemies. We can throw objects. Lots of ways to use the environment in this game. Anything else coming to mind as far as like gameplay and what we can do?
Yeah. I don't think that we mentioned it's a 3D environment, but it is in a 3D environment. So you are doing some camera control too. And that's, just felt it was worth mentioning since we talked about a 2D beat 'em up earlier. But
yes, absolutely. Yeah. So DiscoCola played a beat 'em up, but in a different perspective. So that was good synergy for today. OniMochi, how much were you able to accomplish in Sifu?
I was able to beat the whole game. So I got through the final fight with Yang, which was very difficult.
No, it was. It was easy.
But I did manage to also go back, and I did a bunch of replays too. There's another ending you can get where you actually don't kill anybody.
I was able to do a little bit of that. I spared everybody except Yang. So I did the first 4, and I'm at the sanctuary. I think my youngest age at the sanctuary is like my late 20s. And
Wow.
I tried to get back to Yang to spare him, and it had been a week since I beat Yang, and I just totally forgot how he worked. So he kicked my butt.
Yeah.
So I have yet to do that, but that's next on my list.
Right.
What about you, DiscoCola? What have you done?
So I finally beat the game the night before last, and then I went back through and pursued that alternate ending, and did accomplish that as well. So I have that done, and I have a lot of the trophies done. However, Honk You, Bopo, my youngest age at the sanctuary is like 47.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
But you spared everybody.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good job. Well, you're farther along than me. I have not done the DLC content really, like the arenas. I
Yeah.
tried one of the arena stages this morning. That's all I've touched. Have either of you done?
I haven't touched it at all.
I have tried a lot of it. It was a fairly recent addition too. It was, like not even maybe 4 months ago. I
Okay.
think
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was pretty recent, but yeah, it's pretty fun. They had a lot of just goofy fun with it. I think making different scenarios for your guy to just fight in, and they add mods to some of them. So there's one where the block button makes everything slow down, like the Matrix.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
And they even give him like a Neo Duster coat.
Oh, heck yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's ones where you fight with like the Kill Bill outfit, and you just fight like 88 guys.
That's amazing. Let's see. Also, we wanted to ask you, why did you pick Sifu to play for this episode?
There's just a lot about this game. I knew as soon as I saw that first trailer that I immediately knew I was going to connect with this game because it just has so much style and creativity, and it really, I think, fits with my style of like the art and stuff I like to do. And it just had a lot of things in it that just looked really interesting to me.
I think I agree with a lot of that as from an outside perspective as well.
Yeah,
So.
it seems like a good pick from you, an appropriate pick. And now, what are your overall thoughts on OniMochi after having done quite a lot in this game?
This game is pretty utterly uncompromising with its design. It just stands out from a lot of other beat 'em ups I've ever played. Like its free flow combat system is just very tight and just a lot more dialed in than any other I've ever played. It is very difficult, but when I got done playing it, I had such a sense of like mastery and accomplishment that a lot of other games just don't provide. But I don't think I would have enjoyed it even half as much if it had pulled its punches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any thoughts on like the story, the world, the characters?
Yeah, the story is very simple, but I think it's told very eloquently, even though it's a simple premise that we've all heard a million times, the revenge story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the characters have a lot of flair. Each one is very distinct, even just like with their environments that they're in, the levels and everything, and all the clues you find to kind of find out a little more about each one of those characters' past and stuff too, and why they're doing this is interesting. So it goes deeper than what you see on the surface.
The more you're talking, the more you're reminding me of stuff we still haven't mentioned, which is like the detective board.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
In Wuguan, we find little items around all the hideouts that fill that in. And, you know, I was going through and reading all those little bits of lore to get some of that backstory. Yeah. Any other parts you want to praise about Sifu, or anything that maybe frustrated you about Sifu?
There are a lot of pockets of frustrating moments in that game, especially with some of those boss battles, because they take a while. Like you got to be ready to sit for a bit.
That's my specialty.
Especially that last fight with Yang.
Yes.
That's a long one.
It's a gauntlet.
All the boss fights have 2 stages, so you got to beat them once and then beat them a second time, and then they change up all their moves. But they do have a lot of health compared to you, and they do a lot more damage compared to you.
Yeah. So a lot of it's being defensive, reacting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
trial
gotta
and
be
error.
you gotta be pretty hyper focused the entire time, because if you lose focus and slip up, you're pretty much dead.
Yeah,
it's
for
done.
sure. Are you prepared to give a score for the game? Do you have a score in mind?
Yeah, actually, I would give it a solid 9. Actually,
A 9.
9
Yeah.
out of 10.
9 out of
Awesome.
10.
Perfect. I'm going to write that down in our little extra special guest column. OniMochi gives Sifu a 9.
And then, Disco, would you mind sharing your overall thoughts?
Yeah, I can do that. My overall thoughts on Sifu is that my hands honking hurt. Not just from button inputs, but also gently introducing my hand to my tabletop a couple of times is how I'll put that.
This has been a thing in the past, OniMochi, where games that are like really high intensity and like high action,
Mhm.
we remark that often because we're playing for hours at a time and just like pressing the buttons furiously and clutching our controllers tightly, they make our hands physically hurt.
Yeah.
I think season, what was it, 2 or 3 was just like every other game was one of those. I think it was season 2.
So it's the season with Death's Door.
Yeah.
Death's Door kind of kicked that off. Yeah.
Yep. So it's a theme here, but it's been a little while. It's been a long time since a game made me quite this angry. I guess we did play Into the Breach recently, but this is a different
kind.
type of anger.
Sure.
Despite that, unlike Into the Breach, I do still like a lot of things about Sifu. The concept is really fascinating. Your body aging as the price for dying is really interesting. Your punishment for dying frequently snowballs, and those stakes really encourage me to play better. But you also get rewarded in the death and aging mechanic by playing better, and you will sometimes defeat an enemy that will remove 1 from your death counter. So that's a proper reward, proper punishment built into what I consider the core element of this character.
Yeah, there isn't just a straight line of getting harder and harder and harder. As long as you're somewhat competent and patient, you can decrease that death counter. And it's not just like a snowball that keeps rolling down the hill.
I don't know if you have to be very competent still, I think, but
there's a way to turn it around.
Yeah.
Somewhat, at least. Yeah.
I like the idea of a themed hideout with a boss at the end. It's really simple, but the ones in this game are varied in a cool way. Like Oni said, it makes them feel grounded. Even the order we go in sort of feels appropriate and like it's an action movie. So of course we go to the lowest security, scuzziest place first in the squats, and we work our way up to the corporate tower. It just makes sense for this progression. I do love the detective board. The board is essentially this game's collectibles. And if the game didn't have this, I think I would have had a much worse time playing through this game than I already did. I think the music is good, but I really especially want to point out the little level intro jingle. The little sounds so cool. It really does a lot to set the mood.
I know what you're talking about, yes.
It's like, okay, we're here now, get your head in the game. But it's just like this 2-second little jingle.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that I'll ever specifically mention a level intro sound ever again, but I felt like I had to here.
Yeah, like you hear it and you're like, I'm ready to fight.
Yeah.
I'm ready to seek revenge. Yeah.
I don't know how they figured out how to do that in music form, but they did it. I think that once you finally get how the game actually works, controls usually feel pretty good. The combat has slowdowns at really nice moments, and the sound effect associated with the slowdown is just like this little mini reward in itself. It does a good job of training your brain to like seek those moments in combat, because those moments are often very rewarding in the combat itself. And then speaking of sound effects, there are sound effects that do a great job at cluing you into what's happening to your mechanics. Mm-hmm. Like the UI in this game is perfectly good, but in most cases, your eyes are glued to the combat.
So you're talking about moments where like maybe your focus meter regains.
Exactly.
And you hear a little shing to let you know that it's ready. Yeah.
It's so easy to just like have such intense focus on your combat that you don't know where your health's at. You don't know how much focus you have. Mm-hmm. But those sound effects really clue you in so that you can keep your eyes on Jin Feng's flail or bell clapper or whatever you call it. I like the shortcuts. I don't think they're all created equal. I wish all of them were more like the one in the museum and much less like the one in the club. But this helps me get to practice bosses a little bit quicker. Not the one I need to actually practice the most, but it helps in that situation. Mm-hmm. Speaking of, like Oni said, I like that each boss is really pretty different. They have unique identities in their appearance, motivations, and especially in their combat. But I extra super duper love that each boss is associated with one of the 5 elements. Mm-hmm. Some listeners will be familiar with the 4 elements: air, earth, water, fire. But in some Eastern cultures, there's 5. It's water, fire, earth, and then wood and metal. Stuff like this is irresistible to me. I love sets of things like that. I always have. Power Rangers, the Airbender series, Bionicle. Even if the bosses were like kind of samey and terrible in every way, I'd probably still buy in on just the elements thing alone.
I think it's worth mentioning the bosses have like fantastical powers. So like Sean the fighter, he's fire based.
Yeah.
So he he starts off by just fighting you with a bow staff, but then he lights his whole place on fire.
Yeah.
He can just do that.
And when you arrive at his room, he's doing something called the burning, where he's like literally leaving a handprint burned on one of his disciples.
Yes.
So there's a lot of that. And then last, I love the art. I'm glad that you picked this for our artist episode, Oni. I don't have the words in my vocabulary or the knowledge of visual art to properly describe what I'm seeing at all times. But when you do see these characters up close, you see these almost like brush stroke details in their skin. And I really love how that looks. It may come as no surprise, but there is plenty that I dislike about Sifu. Mostly just that it's crazy stupid hard. Like, there is an easy mode, and I didn't turn it on yet because I know that you didn't, Bopo, and I assume you didn't either, Oni. I assume you played on the normal mode.
Yeah.
So I don't know how big of a difference this makes, but in its intended form, I find this game entirely unapproachable for most players. Like, I've said it before on this podcast, I don't see myself as a god gamer or even like an exceptional gamer, but I do play and complete a lot of really hard games. And I think this one asks for a bit too much for a majority of people. And the 100% completion club on PSN profiles sort of validates that in my mind, although a lot of that might have to do with the DLC trophies and most people having just being done with Sifu after
and not revisiting the game for something that just came out. Yeah.
But all the same, this game makes me like mad pretty often, and it's been such a long time since I felt that visceral knee-jerk reaction that literally like brings me to my feet. Last time being Fury, and then Godhome and Hollow Knight before that. Up until 2 nights ago, I was prepared to say that this is the hardest game I've ever played in my life, and I almost did just like not finish it. Fury is also still the hardest game I've ever played in my life. However, they're different. Like in Fury, your reaction time window seems much, much smaller than in Sifu. But in Sifu, you're not only fighting against enemies, but against your own perspective. So while there is a slightly wider margin for error, it's also a lot easier to make mistakes because your camera isn't really fixed the way it is in Fury. So I guess my next big complaint is that while the camera has a lot of freedom, and that adds a lot of real cinematic flair to the game, I did find that the camera was sometimes an obstacle to overcome in many cases, and often found the more side-scrolly sections that are in this game to be much easier and just generally more enjoyable overall. I did praise the detective board earlier, but it does also have a massive pain point for me, and that is that there's essentially like one ultimate collectible in each level, but those collectibles are actually in other hideouts. And the most egregious, in my opinion, is actually the flowers key for the first hideout.
Yes.
Which is located near the end of the game.
Didn't find that for a long time. Yeah.
So not only did I go through the first level about half a dozen times trying to find the stupid key, once I learned I would have to return to the first hideout later, I was going to be potentially wiping out one of the greatest runs I had. And I kind of felt insulted. Like, I had a run where I got out really young and I managed to get over 10,000 points. So I had this really good point-based shrine reward. Luckily, I did start pursuing that alternate ending roughly at about the same time. So I sort of waited to go back until I was pursuing that alternate ending anyways. Going back to difficulty a little bit, I don't like that this game, and frankly a lot of video guides online, are like really digging into the nuance of combos in this game, because I spend so long trying and swearing to duck that I am doing the correct inputs and just getting wailed on in smaller waves of enemies. It gets so infuriating. And then when I started pursuing this alternate ending, I found and adopted a new strategy. And that new strategy was actually my original noob strategy that I used when I originally started the game, except it was just do that, but push the buttons a lot faster. And so I was just a little bit frustrated that I like spent a lot of time trying to like really dig into this nuance and just failing when I did ultimately find a way to just basically cheese the game. So that was a little bit upsetting.
You did give it a really fair shake. Like, you really tried. It sounds like, you
I feel like I did. But
yeah. I mean, it sounds like you did. Yeah.
So in the end, this game is infuriating, but not in a way that makes me feel hopeless, the same way that Into the Breach does. But it is so frustrating to feel like I'm doing everything right just to get smacked down by someone who is saying, she can't even keep her focus or whatever. I'm just like, no, I can. I swear I'm pushing the right buttons. But all the same, for some reason, I still felt compelled to overcome this great challenge. And I eventually did, though not in the way that I'm the most proud of, but I also kind of don't care. Sifu is a game that is difficult for difficulty's sake, and I don't always love that, but it still has a lot of great presentation and tons of attention to detail and a lot of nuance for those that want to find it. So this may still surprise you, but I do still appreciate a lot about Sifu, and I give it a 7.5.
Wow, that's
nice.
Maybe, I guess that makes sense, but that is more positive than maybe I expected heading into this room today. I was thinking, oh no, is he going to maybe not give it a low score like Into the Breach?
Yeah.
But I know that this game's hard, and I know that's not always your favorite thing to do.
The big thing is that I think it's hard for being hard's sake, and that does frustrate me when games do that. But there is a lot of care that went into it, and I can see that. And if I had a body that could perform inputs better, then I know I would feel different. But that's just not what my body can do.
I see. Well, later I'd like to ask you too about maybe what are some of our favorite areas? What are some of the enemies that frustrate us? What are the enemies where when we see them, are they just giving us a terrible time each time and we can't figure them out? I have my answer to those, but I'll share my overall thoughts. Sifu is an easy to learn, difficult to master action game that made my hands hurt, just like DiscoCola. And I love it. I love this game. I love how this game feels. I love that there's like this sense of tactility, the avoiding or parrying to the rhythm of enemy attacks and slowly learning that feels good. I was performing leg sweeps eventually, and that just feels really nice when you connect with somebody and they fall down, and then I go down and give them a few punches in their face. So it all feels so powerful when you pull it off. The takedowns feel great too. This is a game that when I play it enough, it makes me feel powerful, and I love when games make us feel that way. By the end of the game, I am definitely able to look back at where I started, which was that introduction section, and I didn't understand how to like block attacks and avoid attacks. I'm able to look back then and then look at where I am now and recognize how much I've learned, how far I've come, and I kind of can't believe how much I've learned. It kind of amazes me that I now look at some of those earlier levels as just so simple. The aging system is really cool. It's not too complex too, other than each decade giving you a health and damage adjustment and then being manageable through the death counter system. It seems like something that might be overwhelming because it's like a big part of this game's identity. I wasn't sure if the aging system would be difficult to comprehend, but I got the hang of it really quickly. And the possibility of becoming an old man or woman long before reaching your end goal was a very tragic and powerful theme for me. I thought that was just so sad to be in the slums, and I haven't even like beaten the botanist yet, and I'm already at the end of my rope because I'm old. But eventually that got better. And I just think that there's a drama there that other martial arts stories, other action games don't have. The shortcuts in Detective Board were amazing. I love that stuff, just like you said. The game is evolving a little as we go through. When we unlock those shortcuts, I start considering my options and I start wondering, well, should I take the shortcut and just get to the boss faster because I just want to get through this run, or should I farm some experience from people instead of taking the shortcut? And I'm mixing and matching those shortcuts too. The personality of each hideout feels different. There's detailed set decoration. There are lots of moments particular to one hideout or one section in a hideout. Going back to the club again, we get to a hallway at one point with those lights on the ground that go.
Oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
And it goes to the beat of the music. I love stuff like that, just like little touches of personality that make the club feel different from the museum and the tower and so on. So I found this game to be like cinematic, especially with those cutscenes. There are many flexible options for playing this game too. You can mix and match those shortcuts. Some enemy encounters are optional, and I didn't actually know this at first. I was like fighting a bunch of enemies I didn't need to, and I streamed pretty much this whole game on Twitch. And I had some like expert Sifu players coming through, not backseating me, but just watching and commenting on stuff I was doing. And at one point, one of them was like, "Wow, you're really out for blood." And I go, what are you talking about?" It's because I was fighting like the gym people in the club. You don't have to fight them.
Yeah.
I just was running into that room and like smacking them immediately, assuming they would fight me. You can skip them. There's lots of stuff like that. So you can still fight them and get experience, though, is the point.
Mhm.
You can play this game in many ways, even though the layout always stays the same. Starting a new game allows you to import your highest skill progression across all saves. There are little things like that too. I just discovered that this morning because I wanted to replay that introduction. I could import all the skills that I unlocked permanently from my first save.
No way.
Love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good news.
Yeah. The goals and the goal rewards after you finish the game are really cool. So when you finish the first ending, you can start doing these little miscellaneous objectives and earn points toward little perks that you can toggle on and off while you play. And there are tons of those. So I could see how someone could just keep playing this game and get tons out of it. There are outfits. There's sparing the bosses, which you both did and I'm working on. So there's more to this experience than it first lets on. And then I just love how this game opens. This introduction of playing as the villain, taking down all these students, slowly getting introduced to this whole posse of bad people, seeing them when they're 8 years younger before we transition. Like they really put a lot of detail into how these people look. There is a bookending in this game visually with a fight where someone gets kicked through a door and they roll out into the rain. That visual is at the end with Yang, and it's also in the introduction. And I just love that cinematic moment too. That's where I get to my dislikes for Sifu. I agree with you, Disco. The camera gets confused in corners and against walls. I was wrestling around with that camera whenever I wasn't like in the middle of the room. So I can't always see what I'm doing. The way some of the systems work is inscrutable. Like, how does picking a different hideout affect your Dragon Shrine upgrades? And like, how does my age play into that? And it turns out your youngest age in each hideout is saved, but your skill or your Dragon Shrine progression can reset if you start picking different hideouts. And it doesn't always explain those things. Also, with avoiding versus dodging versus blocking versus parrying, I think the game does teach us how to do all those things, but it largely leaves it up to us as far as what is best for a situation. And so I feel like maybe it's a combination of getting all that way too soon in the game mixed with just not getting enough background information on what all those things do. I don't know, but I was getting all those things confused and I was never sure in the first 5 hours what I should be doing. I eventually adopted a mostly avoiding technique where I was just holding L1 and flicking the stick backward to just try to time it with attacks. But before that, I was kind of struggling with all that stuff. For me, Sifu is all about electrifying action. It doesn't explain everything clearly for me, and it can be exhausting to play for long stretches. This game makes my hands hurt again, but I feel so accomplished making progress in it. I'm not a huge beat 'em up or fighting person, but Sifu is something more. It is a tale of revenge. It is a game that helps you without holding your hand, and it's a game made with passion from Slow Clap. Like Oni, I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10.
Excellent.
I
Nice.
really
All right.
enjoyed it. As we're going through all these hideouts and we're selecting upgrades and we're finding new skills, do you have certain maneuvers you guys are using a lot?
Anything that would knock them down or stun them to give me more time to plan my next move. So the leg sweep was one of the first ones I definitely unlocked.
Were you spamming that on
Oh,
every
all the
enemy?
time.
Yeah.
Just to see how often can I pull this off?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I try to fill that focus meter up before I go into a boss fight, and then I just sweep him 3 times in a row and just get as much damage as I could, just not let him up.
Yeah, you do start to think about that where I'm in the room outside the boss room. I don't want to use my focus. I want to save that for the harder encounter. Disco, what about
Yeah,
you?
pretty much the same. Like big sweep energy. Eventually, when you can like start kicking objects towards enemies, using that a lot too, that helps a lot. But basically, if you can knock someone down, that's free damage.
Yeah.
That they're not going to like counter you most of the time. So really, really helpful. Very necessary. Big yes.
When you get someone on the floor and you do the 2 punches in their
Yeah.
face, I don't know why it's only 2. Like you could just sit there and just keep doing it, but you're invincible for a second. You know, no one can hit you, so that's really nice. It allows you to take a mental break too.
Yeah.
If you're in the middle of a big fight,
And I think it has a little bit of that slowdown too. Like whenever there's like an impact with an object and an enemy, or even yourself, I think if you get something thrown at you, there is that little bit of a slowdown, so that it buys you milliseconds, but milliseconds are precious.
They are. There are the dragon shrines. I found that I was really conflicted about which dragon shrine upgrades to grab a lot of the time. I was like back and forth between 2 or 3. And when I started relying on avoiding, I started picking the structure regain on avoids. So I was using that to kind of stay defensive and stay in the fight, not defending myself as much. Did you have dragon shrine upgrades that you preferred, or did you just do whatever?
Health gain was definitely a big one. So anytime you do a takedown, you get a little bit of health back. And just any of them that help me last longer through the level, through the fights. So like focus regain was also a big one. I used a lot, upgraded, because I just want to do more leg sweeps. So just, like gotta more
Oni's
often.
just going through, just kicking people
Yeah.
in
Oh,
this
yeah.
game. Just
It's
that's all you're doing.
It's important.
It is important.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, it actually usually ended up depending on what my main task was at the time. So early on in the game and just, trying to get to the next level as best I could, like I was relying on that health regain because I was doing a lot of takedowns and I was also taking a lot of damage, so I needed that health regain. But eventually when I was like getting to the point where my task is to defeat Yang, I was ignoring weapon power-ups. I was ignoring
Yes.
focus even, because you don't even get to use focus in the fight against Yang. So I was just like starting to do that structured regain stuff.
You're creating a build.
I'm creating
For
a
Yang.
build.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
That's an interesting way to
it
put
depends on my overarching task.
After playing this game, I now would talk to a newcomer and give them tips. I didn't have anybody doing that for me, but I think avoiding is like crazy overpowered in this game. I think it's like the secret to getting through a lot of stages for me, like because the avoiding just makes sense to me. And I think a vast majority, if not all, attacks can be avoided, as well as blocking. Like you can block most attacks. If you have enough structure, you can block. You might not always be able to block more than 1 or 2 attacks in a row, but there are always those defenses. What would you two say to a new player to maybe like help them feel more at ease with this like difficult game?
Patience, I think, is the biggest thing for this game. It's not one you're just going to fly through. It is a very short campaign, but it will slow you down.
I think the world record run from like the start of the game to the end is like 20 some minutes.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Which I guess I can believe, but I'd never be able to do myself. But the game is that short with all the shortcuts and stuff. Like if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. So for me, I did sort of allude to a way to cheese the game, which boils down to parrying everything you absolutely can to break their structure and then just rely on takedowns.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recommend that. You still die, but you die less frequently. So at the end of the game, when I was just, please, Duck, let me beat this game, it was sort of just like spamming the parry button and then also the like R2 to dodge sideways and then getting off a couple of light attacks here.
Were you
and there.
doing that on Yang?
Yes.
Okay, just
that was
spam
the only way I was able to beat Yang in time.
Yeah, well, he does the like fast succession of attacks. You
Yep.
kind of have to do that with some of them.
Yeah, and
He's basically you, but better.
Yeah.
Like he has all your moves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it was the only way I could do it. I went into it trying to do the avoid technique. And maybe if I would have not been so close to deadline, maybe I could have learned his attack patterns, but I couldn't. So I just relied on parrying.
With avoid, there is, it's very useful, but there are times where you have to do the upward avoid and the downward avoid.
That's so hard I can't react that fast.
I know. Well, it kind of comes down to learning tells, which I didn't have
even still
the time for sometimes.
I'm thinking of like Sean, because like you do have to do a high and a low, and same with Jin Fang. She has a high and a low, but I think she's a little bit easier personally. But yeah, just Sean almost made me quit the game because I can't react fast enough to get that high and low avoid.
That's so interesting because I found Sean to be beatable by just doing the downward avoid. I was only doing that and I was able to be mostly fine. There were times where he like rushed in and did a very uncommon move, but then with Jin Fang, I had a tough time with Jin Fang, so everybody kind of has their different experience with the hideouts and the bosses. For me, like Kuroki in the museum was really satisfying to learn because once you understand the timing, I found like dodging all of her really fast attacks felt really good, looked really cool. It was very, again, cinematic. And I was able to catch her kunai throws at a certain point because I unlocked that move. Nice. What were your bosses that you just like had a great time with?
Favorite boss? Honestly, I'm going to say Yang was my favorite boss. Wow. Because even though he's the hardest one, and you can't use any of your focus moves on him, so I couldn't leg sweep. No leg sweep.
No sweeping.
No, but it was just like you kind of get in that flow state when you're in that fight because it's so long. It's such a long fight. But when I got done with it, I just had such a good feeling that I beat such a difficult opponent without relying on my sweeps or like any kind of handicap.
Mm-hmm.
You're walking without the crutches.
Basically, yeah. And like, so it gave me this totally sense of like mastery and like accomplishment that you felt like at the end, like now you are the master.
Oh, I love that this game gave you that feeling.
Yeah.
That's great. For me, my favorite is specifically stage 2 Kuroki. Stage 1 baffled me, couldn't figure her moveset out, even seemed like it was different than the video guide I was trying to follow. Like the moves didn't match what I was seeing on that video guide.
It seemed like your proximity to her affected how she behaved.
It does a little bit, but even still, like the way the patterns were all the same. Stage 2 Kuroki, much more interesting, much more fun to fight, and just like one of the easiest bosses. Also has the best shortcut, so it's easier to practice that one anyway.
I loved the stage on that.
Yeah.
That looks really cool with all the black waves behind you and like the white,
yeah.
Like the museum, just that whole stage.
When you enter the really like surreal
but like the stage
section.
2 Kuroki fight especially, it just looked so cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
I agree.
Yes. When it comes to the hideouts before the bosses, I think there are memorable moments in all of them. I find myself really liking the museum because of all like the art installations, lots of creativity there. There is a moment where if you take the long way because you haven't unlocked the elevator shortcut yet, you go to that red room. Do you remember the red room before Kuroki?
Yeah.
With the twins?
With the twins. But before you fight them, there are all those like statues.
Yeah.
And you drop down in there and it's like a trap door.
Yeah.
So I had no idea it was going down there. I was so scared because I had thought like one of these is not real. It's going to pop out and just start attacking me. And there's a moment when I was streaming this game where I was like, oh no, one of these is just going to make me pee my pants. And as I'm saying that, one of them attacks me and I screamed. So I will I'll always remember that moment from this game.
And please tell me someone clipped that.
I clipped it myself.
Okay.
I think that one gets everybody. It definitely got me too.
So are there moments from hideouts or maybe like just hideouts in general that you love?
I'm going to go with the museum again too, because that's probably just the artist in me too. But like, I think it had some of the most creative fight scenes and like areas. Like you said, the red room was definitely interesting. There was a lot of other really cool ones like that. I did find myself after I beat everybody up just going around and like looking at all the art installations
Oh,
and just like,
yeah.
look at this. This is
It
cool.
doesn't
Like,
sound like something you'd do.
yeah, like I'm just touring the museum like a regular tourist.
With like bodies on the ground.
Yeah, like
Excuse me.
stepping over
Let me-
them, like then having like for all these like deep thoughts about the art. But then like they did a lot of those like side scroller kind of hallway scenes that I love.
Yes. They felt the first one in the slums, it feels like a tribute to the movie Old Boy. I don't know if you've seen that, but there's a famous fight scene in Old Boy where it is that perspective, that same width of the shot. And it's a lot of hand to hand, like really quick fighting in a shot that doesn't cut. I was like, we're doing Old Boy in this game. This is amazing.
It reminded me of the, you ever watch Daredevil? You've seen that series?
No, I haven't seen the series.
There's a couple scenes in there that are very similar where you follow him through an entire hallway and the camera never goes off of him and he just beats up everybody through the this brutal fight.
And it's like, it's brutal, it's powerful. The game makes you feel that way
Yeah.
in those scenes where you can see everybody just in a line, almost like taking their turn to fight you, and you're just slowly taking them all out. It's amazing. Disco, what about you?
Yeah, I'm almost the same as Oni. Like, I loved the museum the most. I did think that a couple of the waves of enemies were too big, but otherwise, I really loved the museum. I loved that section where the world seems fantastical and you're in a totally different world. Very fun, really unique identity. And again, the side-scrolling sections that are few and far between, but I really appreciate those because I'm just having an easier time. And they look really cool.
Because this game is so different with its aging system, it is kind of a different length than I expected, at least. I'm curious about what games pair well with this. You've played some beat 'em up games, Disco. Can you think of anything that reminds you of this or contrasts really well with this?
I mean, there's still a lot going on that's present in those 2D beat 'em ups. So you're comboing your light and heavy, your specials, you're learning new moves. So that's all the same. You're just doing it in a 3D space. And I find that to be just way more difficult. But as far as another game like this, it feels more, I shouldn't say this because I've never properly played a modern Street Fighter or Tekken game, but it feels like it has the nuance of those fighting games and asks that of you. So based on what I assume modern fighting games are like, it pairs better, I think, with the fighting side of games.
Yeah, I wrote down Tekken 7.
Mhm.
I've played a little bit of Tekken 7, but I'm not a huge fighting game fan. That's just like a more recent one I have
Yeah.
played.
Mhm.
Any other answers to that?
Yeah, there's a few of them I could think of. The first one was Absolver, which was actually Slow Clap's first game before Sifu.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's very, very similar. In fact, you can, if you play it, like you definitely can tell like this was a precursor to Sifu.
Okay.
But same thing. It's a martial arts themed action focused with a lot of deep combat mechanics. Very similar. It has kind of a unique aesthetic. The same art style. Not really much of a story to it. It's just more like running around this kind of open world, beating up a bunch of guys.
I might check that out.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sounds,
No
that
kidding.
sounds amazing. Yeah. I think I looked up Slow Clap just on Wikipedia or something. And I did
Yeah.
see Absolver, but I haven't ever seen footage of it or anything.
If you watch it, it's very, very similar. It's a little more different because you can, after you learn different moves, you can build your own fighting style with all the different moves. So you can create different styles, and then you can meet other players, and then you can swap like your skill sets and stuff like that with them.
Interesting.
So you
Whoa.
can like basically teach other people your fighting style.
So there's like an online component.
Yeah,
to
it's a little bit like Journey, where you just randomly meet people and
Okay.
you don't
Yeah.
see their name or anything. You don't know who they are. You
Yeah.
can't talk to them.
You just know that somewhere in the world, that's a person
Yeah.
also playing.
Fascinating.
Well, that might pair well with Journey. That should be your secret game when we play Journey, DiscoCola.
We'll see.
Other ones I can think of is like maybe like Sekiro. Honestly,
Oh, okay.
I think because it's another game that shares the emphasis on precise combat and learning from your deaths.
And there's kind of a structure system.
It have a
in
structure
that.
system too. Yeah, there's a few others like For Honor, I think is also another one. his unique melee combat system where you have to carefully read your opponent's actions and plan your responses accordingly. And then if you want more just generally fun beat 'em up, I would go with like Midnight Fight Express.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of that one?
I have heard of
Yeah.
that one. Yeah.
It's a lot of hand-to-hand combat, different environments, but very intense. But it's much more exaggerated, over the top fighting. So, but it's still fun. Just beat 'em up.
Yeah. There might be listeners who either have played those games and now
Yeah.
they might be more interested in Sifu, or they've played Sifu and maybe want something that's similar. So
Yeah.
it's helpful to know about for sure. Oni or Disco, is there anything left unsaid about Sifu?
Yeah, we kind of threw you into the fire there, Oni. You had to go first. Is
Yeah,
there anything
no.
you want to add, counter anything that we said about the game?
This game does demand a lot of you, and that can be a sword that cuts both ways, because you do get frustrated, but at the same time, like I said, you get such a good feeling when you finally beat that level
Yeah.
or that boss. So I think anybody who wants a challenge with kind of high risk, high rewards, I think that's a game you would definitely enjoy.
I agree. I did finally feel satisfied, but it was more like finally, duck you, Sean. I'm happy you're gone. I don't want to spare you, but I will. But I do agree that you do feel that great satisfaction
Right.
at the end.
Looking back over this list of games we've played for the season, this is our last like normal episode of season 5. So we've played 19 other games in this, or I'm sorry, 29 other games in this season.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. And looking back over the ones I've played, I think I have to call Sifu the one that gave me the greatest sense of accomplishment, just because it was sort of arduous and it punished me before I was able to punish the game with my somewhat better skills than I had going in.
Yeah.
So in a way, that's what makes this game feel fitting as a season closer too, I guess,
Yeah.
because it was such a journey for me. I think I spent like 20 plus hours in this game. Like,
I don't have a calculation, but it's got to be at least that.
yeah. Well, OniMochi, thank you so much for joining us for this review, and for giving your insight into your gaming background and why this game was important and fun and powerful for you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a great time.
I feel so bad. I bought the physical edition of this, and it comes with like an art book, and I was going to bring that, and it was just going to be this cool thing that really synergized well with our guest, but my car broke down before.
Sorry, I did buy it
here.
too.
Oh, okay. So you've seen it. So you know it. You have the
Amazing.
Vengeance edition,
Yeah.
so you have it.
Amazing.
Okay.
Well, that is our review of Sifu. You can play it on PC, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. OniMochi rated it a 9. DiscoCola rated it a 7.5. I rated it a 9. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed and on common podcast platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg. Our art comes from this guy, OniMochi. Underplayed is on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at UnderplayedPod. You can find me in those places at BoPo. That's BO_PO. I'm also on the GG app where you can see my game lists and what I'm currently playing.
And I am at DiscoCola in all of those places to varying degrees, including the GG app, where I've added 2 new lists, including one that is composed of Mega Man games that I consider essential for the story and Mega Man likes, and I plan to stream them in like a 24-hour or 2 just massive streams this summer. So if you have a recommendation, I'll take it. And you can find Underplayed on all of those channels, including Twitch, where we will be premiering all of these episodes, including this one that you're probably maybe listening to on Twitch right now.
Whoa, time traveling. Next time, we'll be reflecting on the 30 games we reviewed for Season 5 and planning our featured games roster for Season 6. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.